Hey everyone, I'm making this video blog in response to Mark Dice's really insulting and awful video called New White Privilege Tax for All White People Supported by Minorities and Shocking Racism Experiment. Now, I'd never heard of Mark Dice until this video popped up in my YouTube feed, and I looked at it. Basically, what he does is go around San Diego and talk to mostly black folks. He says minorities, but mostly black folks. One person who's Latino and Asian, but mostly black folks, and asks them to sign a petition in support of something called a white privilege tax. And he says, a rather condescending, kind of weird fashion, well, yeah, basically tax the white man and that sort of thing. And he gets signatures. He thinks this is surprising, and so Dice, and I'm talking to you, Mr. Dice, says, these mentally deranged morons. That's what he called the people who signed the petition. And I immediately thought, as someone who's old enough to be Mr. Dice's father, although I've dated women younger than him, I thought, he has no sense of history, doesn't understand what the entire historic discussion of reparations for slavery has been, and comes off with a really typical middle-aged white male conservative point of view, and he thinks that's okay, as opposed to a point of view that really could be intelligent. Not at all. When Mr. Mark, when you referred to your the people you were interviewing as mentally deranged morons, I immediately stopped. I just turned off the video, because going back to the late 1800s to 1999, when the African World Federation called for $777 trillion to be paid by the West to Africa within 5 years, and more recently to a great piece in the Atlantic about what a modern policy design around reparations would look like in America. This has been a constant discussion. Why? Because of the damage of slavery and the damage of prejudice. Now, you would say, I'm talking about today and this idea of white privilege. It exists. You undoubtedly, for example, let me give you an example. You undoubtedly would be a fan of open carry. That is, someone having the right to carry, say, an AR-15 wherever they go. But there's a famous YouTube video showing what happens to a black person, a black guy, black man, when he carries it versus a white guy. Most white guys buy AR-15, so really this is a policy that supports white guys supporting AR-15s, because a black guy carrying AR-15 in an open carry area is several times more likely to be attacked and jailed under some reading of a law, an obscure law, than his white counterpart. That's not right. It goes further than that. But what bothers me about your video is it never occurred to you to ask the question, what is it in the experience of the people that I'm talking to that will allow them to immediately sign this petition? And for those of you who are watching this who don't understand California law, anyone can establish an initiative to change a law. A fellow tried to do this not too far from where Mark lives in San Diego, and if that law were passed, it would have allowed a person who was really screwed up to shoot somebody else who they thought was gay. You heard that correctly. Fortunately, our great Attorney General, hopefully Senator Kamala Harris, squashed that, and it never came to a point where the citizens of California would be allowed the opportunity to vote on such a horrendous thing. So for you, Mark, Mr. Dice, to walk around and ask for people for signatures in the California context is quite common. So a person from that perspective is going to stop and listen to you, first of all. A. B, knowing and having seen, given that this video was put up very recently, having seen pure, myriad examples of white police brutality on the part of two black persons, those persons are sensitized to the idea that something has to be done. So here comes, white guy, middle age, harmless looking, asking the question. They think you're cool. So then you turn around, you call them mentally deranged morons? I can't get over that a person would use their YouTube channel to insult other people that way. Again, the bottom line is, you buried the lead. You say you're a media analyst. Let me tell you something, pal. As a guy who's been in media and runs his own media company, you buried the lead. Okay. The lead was, what is it? What's going on that would cause people to think we need to sign this kind of petition? Where did we go wrong? I will tell you the problem, Mr. Dice. The problem is this. Today, we are in a country that is one of only 2 countries that has a combination of great economic power and yet a multi-ethnic population. And we are in competition with other countries that are becoming as powerful. Some would argue that China is more powerful. I would argue they are not, because of the lack of a military. But I digress. Military of our size, but I digress, okay? My point basically is this. All of the other countries, China, Japan before, the newly industrialized countries of the Pacific Rim, many other countries, the emerging countries within Northern Africa, the changing and emerging South Africa is falling within the multi-ethnic area, and therefore, along with the UK and United States, on the other side of the equation that I'm presenting. But it looks like this. The other countries that I mentioned, most notably China and Japan, are popularly recognized as mono-ethnic. We, the United States, UK, South Africa primarily, of course you have the European Union and others, but primarily the UK and the United States are identified as multi-ethnic countries. And if you take a look at the policies, the social policies, they don't take care of their own, whereas the mono-ethnic countries take care of their own. The classic example that goes all the way back to my thesis that I wrote at Berkeley in 1987, A Theory of Decline, the American Institution, the World Economy, is that in Japan's case, with its kairitsu structure, its businesses are subsidized by its government to dump products. Dump means to sell a product below its production cost, thereby allowing sale for a lower price in another market, in this case the American market, to take over an industry. In this classic example, the automotive industry. By contrast, today, we have United Airlines, an American company that merged with Continental with worldwide roots, saying that it is having a hard time competing against airlines from Qatar, for example, because Qatar heavily subsidizes its airlines, like Emirates, and allows them to compete successfully and aggressively in our domestic market. So the obvious question is, why don't we subsidize United Airlines? Let's go a step further. Why don't we subsidize heavy industry in this country to keep those industries here? Why? Because what's happened, and what's happened over the past 35 years, and is only intensified over the generation, is the offshoring of jobs. And the result is that our wages, adjusted for inflation, have arguably not grown. Arguably not grown. All you have to do is go back, apply a common inflation test formula to 1960, and see what I'm talking about. It's very simple to do if you understand at all mathematical economics. Now, when you do this analysis, you will come to the conclusion that, and you look at the demographics of the countries we compete against, that basically they take care of their own businesses and people, and we don't. If we had a system where we were keeping more jobs here, where the American standard of living could be supported through subsidized wages, where a person could get a great paying job, not a job at McDonald's, no offense to McDonald's, but I'm saying, not a desire to massively push up the minimum wage to a point where it chokes off small business growth, okay, which could happen, all right? And I'm a fan of minimum wage, but I have a limit here. as a small businessman. I have a limit myself. Okay, my point is basically this: we're at a point where, without subsidizing wages, we pit people against each other for jobs. We say to them, get retrained for jobs. The jobs aren't there, and we don't do a good job of maintaining them right here in our soil. Right here. The best example of where we came close to taking care of our own was the economic stimulus package that President Obama passed in 2009. It worked. It worked very well. Any cold read of economic statistics in the United States, if you know how to read them and analyze them, okay, will tell you that. A very cold read will tell you that. So all of this worldview that I'm giving you comes back to what I'm talking about. We don't take care of each other. You call yourself an American citizen, and yet you put out something that's anti-American. And not only that, it's anti-us, getting us together, bringing us together. You like to rip us apart, okay? That's my criticism with your video and your point of view. You're not a media critic. In fact, you're a lot like Fox News. This is part one.